years old, and I was once someone's starter girlfriend. It's a title I never asked for, but one I'll never forget. People talk about first loves like they're sacred, but no one warns you about being the practice run the woman a man uses to figure out what he wants before moving on to someone better. When Kevin Bennett called me that, he said it like a joke, like it didn't cost me the version of myself that believed love meant loyalty. I met Kevin when I was 23. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and seemed to pull the air with him, confident, charming, the kind who made you feel seen when his eyes met yours. I, on the other hand, was quieter, practical. I had already been working full-time as a project coordinator at an architecture firm. I loved my routines, my small apartment, my peace. Kevin was still finishing his degree in marketing. He called me steady, said I was different from the girls he usually met, that I made him feel grounded. Back then, I thought that was a compliment. We started dating quickly. Within months, we were inseparable. He'd study late at my place while I worked on reports beside him. On weekends, we'd cook, take walks, talk about the future. He said things like, "When I graduate, we'll move somewhere new, start fresh." I believed him. When he moved into my apartment, I offered to come up to me soon. I didn't mind. I figured we were a team, and teams help each other through uneven seasons. Looking back, the cracks were there early, just quiet. Kevin loved being the center of attention. His friends were loud, glamorous, the kind who measured success in nights out and Instagram stories. Whenever we went out together, I always felt like the background character to his show. They'd tease him. "So when are you going to upgrade, man? Don't tell me you're settling down already." He'd laugh, never defend me, just laugh, that low, charming sound that made people adore him. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that love wasn't a performance. But the small things started to pile up, the subtle digs, the jokes at my expense. When I'd suggest staying in and watching a movie, he'd smirk. "You're so predictable." When I surprised him with a weekend cabin trip, he'd sigh. "That's cute, but couldn't you plan something more exciting?" It didn't matter how much effort I put in. Kevin always made me feel like I was enough, but never extraordinary. Still, I stayed, because I believed love was about patience, about showing up, about proving that stability could outlast excitement. The night everything changed wasn't special at first. It was a Friday he'd asked me to come out with him and a few of his friends to celebrate someone's promotion. I almost said no. I was exhausted from work. But he said, "Come on, Wendy. It won't be the same without you." So I went. The place was one of those trendy bars where the music is too loud to think and the lights make everyone look more glamorous than they are. Kevin thrived in those spaces. He laughed louder than anyone, told stories like he was auditioning for a movie, and his friends cheered him on. I sat beside him, smiling, sipping my drink, watching him glow. I told myself this was what compromise looked like. At some point, one of his friends leaned across the table, a woman named Tasha, with a mischievous grin, and asked, "So Kevin is Wendy the one? Are we hearing wedding bells soon?" The table erupted with laughter. I expected Kevin to roll his eyes, maybe say something playful like, "Who knows, maybe someday." Instead, he raised his glass and said with that easy smile, "She's perfect for now, my starter girlfriend." They howled. Someone even clinked his glass and said, "Like a starter home." Kevin laughed hard, and I just sat there smiling like my heart hadn't just cracked open in front of everyone. Their laughter blurred. The music drowned beneath the rush in my ears. It felt like falling in slow motion, the world bright and dizzy, his face still glowing under the lights as if he hadn't just reduced me to a rehearsal. He kept talking, the conversation moved on, but for me, time stopped there. That moment became a mark I couldn't wash off. When we finally left, I didn't say a word. I remember the sound of my heels on the pavement, the cold air, his voice carefree beside me. He didn't notice my silence. Maybe he never really did. Inside the car, I stared out the window, replaying it again and again. Starter girlfriend. Safe. Predictable. Good enough for practice. I should have known right then that everything would change. But denial is softer than truth, and I wasn't ready to wake up yet. The drive home was silent. The kind of silence that feels heavy, almost alive, like even the air knows something's about to break. Kevin hummed along to the radio, drumming his fingers against the steering wheel. I sat there staring at the blur of streetlights, trying to understand how someone could hum after calling me practice. Finally, I spoke. My voice was calm, too calm. "Kevin, what did you mean earlier, starter girlfriend?" He glanced at me briefly, then looked back at the road. "Oh, come on, Wendy. Don't tell me you're taking that seriously. It was just a joke." It didn't sound like a joke. He sighed, the kind of sigh that said he was already tired of the conversation. You always overthink things. I was just trying to make them laugh. Don't make it a big deal. You said I was a starter girlfriend, someone to practice on until you're ready for the real thing. My voice cracked at the word starter, and I hated that it did. Kevin chuckled under his breath. You really don't get how jokes work, do you? Relax. Not everything I say is some deep confession. That word relax burned more than the insult itself. It was the tone. That light, dismissive tone that told me my pain was inconvenient to him. I turned toward him. Is that really how you see me? Temporary. He kept his eyes on the road. Wendy, come on, you're young. We're both figuring life out. I'm not saying you're not great. You just, don't have to think this is forever. I stared at him, trying to recognize the man I'd once believed in. He looked the same messy hair, same jawline, same half smile that used to make me feel safe. But the way he said forever like it was a childish word made me realize we were strangers sitting in the same car. I whispered, I thought we were building something together. He didn't answer. He just turned up the volume on the radio. That was when I knew. The man I loved was gone. Or maybe he'd never been who I thought he was. When we got back to the apartment, Kevin walked in like nothing had happened. He tossed his keys on the counter, kicked off his shoes, and collapsed on the couch. You're really going to sulk all night over this? He asked, reaching for the remote. I told you it was a joke. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked into the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out my duffel bag. The sound of the zipper caught his attention. What are you doing? Leaving. He blinked. Wait, seriously? Zipped the bag shut. You called me your starter girlfriend. You think I'm just a chapter before the real story starts. He scoffed, incredulous. You're being dramatic. I looked up at him, really looked the man who once told me I made him feel grounded. Now looked like a stranger balancing on his own ego. No, I said quietly. I'm just done pretending this is love. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he leaned back against the couch and muttered, Fine, go ahead. If you want to throw everything away over one joke that's on you, you'll regret it. I slung the bag over my shoulder and walked to the door. Maybe I said softly, but at least I'll regret it on my own terms. I left the apartment key on the table. The click of the door behind me felt louder than it should have, final, like a seal closing. Outside, the night air was sharp and clean. I stood on the sidewalk for a while, breathing, trembling, realizing that silence could feel both painful and free. He thought I'd come back, that I'd text him in the morning, apologize, call it a misunderstanding. But I didn't. For the first time in years, I didn't chase after someone who made me feel small. That night, I lay awake on my friend Natalie's couch, staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him laughing at that table. Starter girlfriend. The words looped like an echo I couldn't turn off. I tried to imagine him missing me, the way I'd cooked for him, stayed up, helping him prep for interviews, listened when he was unsure of his future. But I knew he wasn't thinking about that. He was probably out drinking, brushing off what happened, telling himself I'd get over it. He didn't know that something had shifted, that I'd finally hit the quiet kind of breaking point, the kind that doesn't explode, it just decides. And once I decide, I don't go back. The first morning after leaving Kevin, I woke up in a stranger's apartment. Well, not a stranger's. My friend Natalie had insisted I crash at her place, but when I opened my eyes and saw the unfamiliar ceiling, the reality hit me like a second heartbreak. This wasn't my home anymore. The life I'd built, the routines I'd loved, they all existed in a space I couldn't return to. I stayed in bed for hours, staring at the light crawling across the wall. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't broken, I was, but because the sadness had already drained into something quieter. Exhaustion. Acceptance. When Natalie knocked softly and peeked in, I just whispered, I'm fine. It was the first lie of many. The days blurred together at first. I went to work, smiled when I had to keep my voice steady in meetings. But every night when I came back to Natalie's tiny guest room, I replayed everything. The laughter at that table, the way he'd said starter girlfriend like it meant nothing, the way I'd loved him anyway. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after leaving someone who never truly saw you. It's not peace, not yet. It's an empty echo, the absence of noise where his voice used to be. At first I hated it, but over time I started realizing something, that silence was mine. For once, no one was talking over me. No one was telling me I was too serious, too quiet, too predictable. I began to fill the silence differently. I started cooking again, not for him, not to impress anyone, but for me. I'd forgotten how much I loved the sound of a pan sizzling, the smell of garlic and butter filling the kitchen. I went for walks after work, headphones and music that used to make me cry, now just sounding like background noise. One morning, I even joined the gym across from my office, the same one Kevin used to mock as a waste of money. I told myself I'd stay busy, but something deeper was happening. Every small thing I did for myself started feeling like rebellion, a quiet personal revenge. It took about 2 weeks before his first message came, a simple, "Hey, how are you?" I stared at it for 10 minutes and didn't reply. 2 days later, "I hope you're okay. We should talk." Then, "I miss you." 3 words that used to mean everything now felt like dust. I didn't respond. Every message after that went unread because I knew what he was doing, trying to see if I'd still orbit around him. He wanted proof that he still mattered. But I was done giving him proof. A month passed, then 2. And with every day that I didn't answer, I felt something inside me shifting, rebuilding, reforming into someone stronger, someone lighter. I noticed little things. I stopped checking his social media. I stopped replaying our last conversation in my head. And one morning I caught my reflection and realized I was smiling. Not because I was happy yet, but because I was free. One Friday night, Natalie came home with a bottle of wine. "You've been way too quiet lately. We're going out." I hesitated, but she was right. It was time. We went to a small rooftop bar, nothing like the loud places Kevin loved. The air was soft, the city lights below us glittering like scattered glass. As I sat there, I realized something. It wasn't the world that had become kinder. It was me finally giving myself permission to breathe. I no longer needed someone to make my life exciting. Peace was thrilling enough. Back at home later that night, I journaled for the first time in years. I wrote one sentence over and over. I gave him stability, and he mistook it for boredom. I looked at that line for a long time. Then I crossed out him and replaced it with myself. I gave myself stability, and for the first time, it feels like freedom. 3 months after I walked out of Kevin's apartment, I stopped counting the days since we'd last spoken. Not because I forgot him, but because remembering started to feel unnecessary. Life had quietly rearranged itself. My work was steady. I'd found a rhythm: early mornings, gym, cooking, silence. Real silence. The kind that didn't ache anymore. And then one ordinary Thursday evening, my phone lit up. Kevin Bennett. "Hey, stranger. Miss you." I stared at the screen, my pulse thudding just once. Not from longing, but from surprise at how little the message affected me. A few months ago, those words would have wrecked me. Now they just felt small. I locked the phone and went back to stirring my pasta. I didn't reply. A week later, another text arrived. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I didn't mean what I said that night. You know that, right?" The arrogance in that last sentence made me laugh. Of course, he thought I knew he didn't mean it, as if that would erase the truth behind his words. I blocked his number. That should have been the end of it, but Kevin never liked losing. 2 weeks later, he found another way in my email. Subject, please read. "Wendy, I know I messed up. I shouldn't have said what I said. You're not just a starter girlfriend. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I miss you more than you think. Can we talk, please?" I hovered over the delete button. Part of me wanted to reply, not because I wanted him back, but because I wanted to say everything I hadn't said before, but I didn't. Silence was still my loudest answer. That's when the mutual friends started showing up again. Tasha, the same one who'd laughed at the starter girlfriend joke, texted me out of nowhere. "Hey, I saw Kevin recently. He's not doing great. Says he misses you. Maybe hear him out." I almost replied, "Did he tell you why we broke up?" But I didn't owe anyone explanations, least of all his audience. Later, I found out through social media that Kevin had started dating someone new, Madison Clark. I recognized her face from his old stories. She was the kind of woman who made an entrance all bright lipstick and loud laughter like life itself was a performance. For a moment, the sight of them together stung. He looked happy, or at least he looked like he wanted the world to believe that. But I told myself, let him have his spotlight. Some people can't breathe without it. Months passed. Kevin and Madison became the fun couple, online matching outfits, endless parties, captions about new beginnings. It almost became a running joke between Natalie and me. The man who hated taking pictures suddenly became a travel influencer. She'd laugh, handing me her phone. I'd smile. But quietly, I knew something she didn't. Performers always tire of their own stage. By the 4th month, I started noticing small changes in their posts. Fewer photos. No more hashtags about love. Then cryptic quotes appeared on Madison's page. "Some lessons come wrapped in heartbreak. Never lose yourself trying to keep someone else." I didn't need to ask what happened. Kevin's pattern was predictable. He loved the chase, not the commitment. And right on cue, a new message arrived. "Kevin, I made a mistake. Can we please talk?" Then another, "You were right. About everything." I didn't appreciate you when I had the chance. Then another, please, just coffee, 1 hour. I'll come to you. I didn't reply to any of them. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because the woman he was trying to reach didn't exist anymore. He broke her that night in the car, and I had no intention of resurrecting her for his redemption arc. I thought silence would end things, but Kevin had one last act left in him. One evening, I came home from work to find an envelope under my apartment door. My name written on it, his handwriting. Inside a handwritten letter. Wendy, I've tried to say this every way I know how, but nothing feels right. You're the only woman who ever made me better. I was stupid scared, and I took you for granted. You called me temporary that night, and you were right, but not because I didn't love you. I just didn't know how to love you right. Please give me another chance to prove it. Kevin. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, as if neatness could rewrite history. I folded the letter back, sealed it again, and walked it straight to the trash chute. That night I slept soundly. For the first time in months, I didn't dream about him at all, just silence. Soft, peaceful final. A full year passed before I saw him again. It was a Saturday night in early spring, one of those evenings that carries a hint of warmth in the air, the kind that makes the city feel alive again after months of cold. Natalie had dragged me to a birthday party for a mutual friend. I almost said no, but she insisted. It's time you show your face again, Wendy. You've been hiding long enough. I wasn't hiding, not really. I just didn't crave attention anymore. I liked my quiet life. But maybe she was right. Maybe closure sometimes wears the face of a crowd. The bar was dimly lit, full of laughter and music. I was mid-conversation when I felt that familiar shift in the air, that sudden awareness you get when someone who used to mean everything is suddenly in the same room. I turned, and there he was. Kevin Bennett. He looked almost the same, but not quite. The shine was gone. His smile looked forced, his shoulders heavier. When his eyes met mine, he froze. Then he smiled, slow and uncertain, like he was testing if he still had permission to. For a brief second, my chest tightened, not from love, but from memory. The human instinct to remember before you recover. He walked over, hesitating just enough to show that this wasn't confidence, it was desperation, dressed as courage. Wendy, he said softly. Hey. Hey, I replied, polite but distant. It's been a while. A year, I said, almost exactly. He laughed awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. You still keep track. No, I said. I just remember the last time I saw you. Some moments don't fade. That made him go quiet. We stood there, surrounded by the noise of the party, and yet it felt like no one else existed. He finally spoke. You look amazing, Wendy. You always did, but now you just glow. Compliments used to disarm me. Now they just bounced off. Thanks, I said simply. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. Listen, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I'm sorry. For everything. I was stupid. I thought I needed excitement, but all I did was lose the best thing I ever had. I stayed silent. Not because I didn't have words, but because I didn't owe him any. Madison and we didn't last, he added quickly, watching for my reaction. It was a disaster. She said I didn't know how to love properly. Guess she was right. I looked at him, then really looked. The man who once mocked my predictability now looked tired, lost, chasing ghosts of what he'd ruined. Kevin, I said gently, I hope you learn how to love properly one day, but it won't be with me. He flinched a little. Wendy, please, don't say that. We had something real. Maybe we just needed time apart to figure it out. No, I said, we didn't need time apart. We needed honesty, and you gave me cruelty instead. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You really think what I said back then defined everything? People say stupid things when they're scared. Scared of what I asked, of settling, of getting it wrong, of being stuck. Then you should have chosen someone worth hurting, I said quietly, because I was the one who stayed Kevin. I believed in you even when you didn't, but you were so busy running from the idea of forever, you never noticed someone who would have stayed for it. He looked away, jaw tight. So that's it. You're just walking away again. No, I said, smiling faintly. This time I'm not walking away. I'm just done standing still. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached out and gently touched his arm the way someone might touch an old photograph before putting it back in a box. You were right, Kevin, I whispered. I was your starter girlfriend, but you were my final mistake. I turned to leave. He called after me, voice breaking just slightly. Wendy, wait. But I didn't, because there are some words you can't unhear and some doors that lock the moment you finally learn your worth. As I walked away, the noise of the party faded into a blur, laughter, music, clinking glasses. Somewhere behind me, Kevin stood still watching. Maybe he finally understood what it felt like to be left behind. Maybe he didn't. Either way, it wasn't my story to finish anymore. It's been 3 years since that night at the party. 3 years since I looked Kevin Bennett in the eyes and finally closed a chapter that had haunted me far too long. Sometimes I still think about that younger version of myself, the girl who stayed up late rewriting his resume, who defended him when his friends made jokes at her expense, who believed that love was something you could earn through patience and loyalty. I don't hate her. I just wish I could tell her sooner that love doesn't have to feel like proving your worth. Life looks different now. My apartment is small, but warm plants on the windowsill, books stacked in corners, a life that feels entirely mine. I got promoted last year. My name is on the door of my own office now. On weekends, I travel. Alone sometimes, with friends other times. I take photos not to post them, but to remember how it felt to belong to myself again. And yes, I eventually met someone new. Not someone perfect, not someone flashy, someone kind, someone who doesn't need to outshine a room to make me feel seen. But the truth is, even if I hadn't met him, I'd still be okay. Because peace, I've learned, isn't found in another person's arms. It's found in the quiet confidence of knowing you can stand alone. A few months ago, I ran into one of Kevin's old friends. She said he's been doing fine, new job, new apartment, still chasing distractions. She mentioned he's single now. I smiled and said, that makes sense. She laughed, not understanding. But I did. Because some people don't change, they just cycle through lessons they refuse to learn. And some of us only need to learn the lesson once. Sometimes I think back to that night in the car, the hum of the radio, the way he smirked when he called me his starter girlfriend. I used to replay that moment with anger. Now I replay it with gratitude. Because he was right, I was his starter girlfriend. But not in the way he meant. I was the one who taught him what love requires and what happens when you treat it carelessly. I was the one who reminded him that good people eventually stop waiting to be seen. And he unknowingly became the start of something too, the start of the woman I was meant to become. So when people ask me about my past, I smile. I don't talk about heartbreak. I talk about awakening. Because being called someone's starter girlfriend once broke me, but it also rebuilt me. And in the end, I realized something simple but powerful. You can't control how someone sees you, but you can control when to stop letting their blindness define your worth. I've stopped looking back. But every now and then, when the city lights reflect against my window and the night is quiet, I whisper a little thank you. Not to Kevin, but to the version of me who finally walked away. She was the real beginning. He called me his starter girlfriend. But really, he was my starter lesson, the one that taught me